Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Masechtas Yevamot daf Ayin Aleph. We are going to begin on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, about 10 lines from the top. So Omer Mar, Rabbi Kiva Omer Enut Sarch. What is this going on? So we opened up the parak discussing the din of an oral, someone who didn't have bris milah. So in this, Rabbi Elazar asked the question: Menayin oral she'ein oich b'truma. How do we know that someone who didn't have the bris milah is not to eat truma? So we went it out from Exeris Shava from Toshev B'Sacher regarding Korban Pesach, that he said just like a Korban Pesach, an oral is usher to eat the Korban Pesach, so too Toshev B'Sacher, which is mentioned by Truma, also an oral is usher to eat Truma. And on this, Rabbi Kiva said, "Enot tzarich." You don't need this Gezer Shava to tell you that an oral cannot eat Truma. He says, "How are you?" So that's what we're going to be focusing on now. So again, let's go back to Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph to understand the words of Rabbi Kiva. Again, he says, Omer Mar, Rabbi Kiva Omer Enot Tzarich. You don't need this Gezer Shava, because Hari Omer Ish L'Rabos has oral. So the pasuk is already coming to tell you that when it comes to someone who's an oral, he will not be able to eat truma. So that's what Ish is coming to tell you, to exclude an oral. The aim L'Rabos has Ainin. So why do we say it's coming to exclude an oral from eating truma? Maybe the din is when it comes to an einin, and as we saw on Ayin and Beis, even though it's true an einin is not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach, but an einin is allowed to eat truma. And the question is, why do we say that an einin is allowed to eat truma? L'chayra, we should maybe say, why do we say an einin is allowed to eat truma? Maybe an einin is not allowed to eat truma, and based on this pasuk. So again, by truma, an einin can eat truma. But an oral can't eat truma. The question is, why not? So Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina, Amakar, the pasuk says, "V'chol zar samarti lach v'loy aninos." The whole issue is because of zarus. It's not because of aninos. So therefore, this person who is an oral falls in the category like a zar, and therefore that individual is not allowed to eat truma. However, it's not an einin. An einin is allowed to eat truma. So ema v'lo arelos. So we said, one second. Maybe, again, it's coming to exclude an oral. The aim of a loyarelos. Maybe the drush is a non-kayan, cannot eat truma. However, v'loy arelos. Why do you say v'lo aninos? No, haksiv ish ish. Ish ish is telling you that an oral is l'rabos is an oral. That an oral is not allowed to eat truma. So ma'yorayisa. So why do we have a pasuk? Oh, we say, the pasuk ish ish must be talking about an oral. How do we know that? And therefore to say, but by an oinin he could eat truma. How do you know how to apply which pasuk for each? So mastabra reilus havila riboy. It makes more sense that we're going to be more strict when it comes to passeling him from eating truma when it comes to someone who's an oral. Why? Shekain masim krusim bidvar ha'eved. That's usually in parentheses, simon. Mechusser maisa, this individual is lacking a physical action of not having a bris. Umasa begufo, and it's something on his body. Va'anish kares, the din of not having a milah is a punishment of kares. V'yesh lefnei adibor, the mitzvah of bris milah took place even before we were mekabel the Torah. Umilah sechara ba'avada ma'kevas. As we said, when it comes to eating, for example, Korban Pesach, the din is that not only do you have to have a bris milah, but if, let's say, your eved or your children don't have a bris, so you can't, then you're not allowed to eat it, even that. So we see, since we're so strict when it comes to the dinim of oral, someone's an oral, someone's an oral, so therefore that individual also say cannot eat truma. Adarabba, ninos have riboy. Maybe we should include a ninos that an einin is not allowed to eat truma. Shekain yeshna b'chol shah. It's something which can happen all the time, as opposed to when it comes to an oral, it's a one-time deal. Once you have a bris milah, it's over. V'nohegas b'nashim b'nashim, as opposed to a meal which is only obviously for men. Ve'en biyodol sakin atzmai, and it's not in your hands to fix it. When it comes to an oral, you can fix it, and you'll no longer be an oral. However, when it comes to ninos, you're an einin. You have a relative that died. So hanach nefishin. So we said there's more problems, more chumras there when it comes to the din of an oine and when it comes to the din of an oral, and therefore an oral is not to eat truma. Rav Omer no bloy hanach nefishin nami lomas is amers. Even if it's true that they're equal as far as different problems, different chumras. Nonetheless, it has to be that the person that we're saying cannot eat is the person who is the oral. Why? Because look at the pasuk. Ish ish. So the pasuk is talking about men. So obviously, it's specifically referring to a male-related issue, which is when it's talking about an oral. However, when it comes to aninus, which is interesting because we said, aninus, it's yeshnu ba'anoshim anoshim. It's applicable to both. So therefore we said, so an oinen is more strict. But it's the very fact that that when it comes to an oral, that it only applies to a male, is clear that that's what the pasuk is talking about, because the pasuk says ish. Rabbi Kiva, as we said, according to Rabbi Kiva, he says you don't need exer shava. So why does it say toishav sachar according to the shita Rabbi Kiva? Rav Shami Yisui aravi mohul the givoini mohul. If you have an aravi who has bris milah or a givoinite who has milah, still they're not allowed to eat the carbon pesach, even though, says Rashi, givoini shem uma shemohalan atzman, they circumcise themselves, or a ravi, right? These are people again that they, for whatever reason, they do bris milah. That doesn't matter. It's the criteria is not you must also only have a bris milah and then you can eat the carbon pesach. No, these people are not able to eat the carbon pesach because again they're not considered. It's in some other nation. So Gemara says v'hani mulin inhu. So you're telling me that these people who are not Jewish are under the category of mohul, that they had a bris milah? It says in Masechtas Nadarim like this: V'hatnan kainim shani nehen la'arelim. So a person makes a neder regarding getting hana from those who are non-circumcised. So mutter ba'areli Yisrael. So you are allowed to get hana from an oral Yisrael. V'asr b'mohali avkachavim. And it's usher when it comes to an avkachavim who had a meal, because you were specific that you said, I'm going to make a neder that about getting hana from those who are an oral. Konim shani nehen lamulim. Let's say the other way around, regarding those who have a milah. So mutter b'muli avkachavim, v'asr b'areli Yisrael. So when it talks about mulim, it's talking about, the statement doesn't mean having had a circumcision. It means you're basically saying Jews, right? And that's what it's saying. So therefore, even if you're an oral Yisrael, you're considered still to be a mulin. But more importantly, as we understand this as a question, if you're an oiv kachavim, if you're not Jewish, even if you had a milah, you're considered to be an oral. So why would we call them? That they had a milah? Even if they had a milah, it doesn't count. It's like they're still considered to be an oral. Rather, it's coming to tell you a different situation. We're talking about a child who was born, and they already had a circumcision. They were born somehow circumcised. Or, for that matter, a convert that did bris milah, but they didn't do tefillah yet. So on this, Rabbi Lezer Tamei, Rabbi Lezer goes according to this reason, the Yomer Ger Shemoyel, if you have a ger that did milah v'lo ger malihu, he's considered to be an absolute ger. The ksaver katan kishnod mohul ein tzarich lahatu menu dam bris. Fine. I must have skipped a line. Okay, but katan shnod kishumo. The ksaver tzarich lahatu menu dam bris. Okay, so according to this shita, he holds that this is the chiddush, that even though you have a bris milah, you're born with a bris milah, so nonetheless you still have to do hatafas dam bris, and until that's done, you wouldn't be able to eat. You would not be able to eat. You're still considered to be halachically as an oral. That's what it's referring to. Fine. Rabbi Lezer with Tamei diyamer ger shemo v'loitabo ger malihu b'ksaver katik shenel mohil ein tzarich lahatim menu dam bris. So this is the machlokus, right? So the whole machlokus is whether or not in these two circumstances, what the din will be. So this is question one. What does he do with Toshav Sacher? It's oral b'truma. that he doesn't need it because we already learned out from this other pasuk that an oral is not allowed to eat truma. So what did he learn out from Tashav Sacher? When it comes to a ger shemoy v'loy tavel or katan shenoy mahul, so we learn out from that they also are not allowed to eat. Okay. But again, that's only according to that sheet. According to Rabbi Lezer, who, as we start off, has the Kser Shava, he doesn't hold to this din. He holds that they don't have to do anything else. Rabbi Lezer, Ha'ish Ish Mayavidale. So what does he do with this pasuk? The Redur Koshim the Adam. Ish it's not a reboy of a pasuk. Boy Rav Chama, Ukva, Katan Orel. And let's say you have a child who is an oral, and Rashi says this is Taich Shmoina. He's not 8 days old yet. So he really, there's no chiyuv of doing bris milah until the child's 8 days old. So mahal soicha b'shemen shel truma. So is he allowed to be anointed with truma oil? Says Rashi. The kaimelon, it says in Masechet Shabbos, the sicha kashtia. That anointing has the same din as drinking. The nafgalan mivet tabu kamayim b'kibra v'kashemen ba'atzmoisav. So there's this link. So the question is, do you allow, because an oral cannot eat truma, or I guess get anointed with truma. So the question is, will you allow this when it comes to a katan oral, because is he called an oral? So this is the question. So the Gemara says like this. A reilus shul b'zmana ma'akva or ma'akva. It's a reilus, the child's an oral, but it's shul b'zmana. So is that ma'akiv that he wouldn't be able to eat truma, or in this case, be smeared with truma? So Amram Zera Tashmal. This will I'll prove to you. Ainli ella mil sachara. I only know the din of a meal of a man b'shas asiyah at the time of the shechita of the carbon pesach v'avadim b'shas achila, and the slaves that they have to have a meal at the time of the eating. That also, when it comes to an eved, he has to also be moil b'shas asiyah at the shechita, and also, obviously, if the person who is the Baal, he has to already had a meal of b'shas asiyah, and later on b'shas achil, which of course is true. But the point is that even when it comes to an eved, it's necessary that he also have had to have this bris milah at that time. Says Rashi, Ein li la'akiv b'pesach el mil sachar sheish lo b'shas asiyah degabe mil sachar k'sev v'oz yakriv al-sois v'hanu shchita gabe avodav nechsev v'oz yoichel bo tefil lo yihavi le eved b'shas asiyah v'havli b'shas achil ma'akvo yimin achilas pischai. So we're going to say that the din is that even when it comes to an eved, he has to have his bris milah from the time of the shchita. Talmud number oz l'gezer shava. Now bishlam avodah mishkachas la. This makes a lot of sense. When it comes to an eved, so it's possible you can come up with a scenario, because we're saying he has to have had a bris milah already from the time of the shechita before, that afternoon. So how is it shaykh that this eved had a milah that night but not in the afternoon? Let's say you purchased him between. In other words, you shechted the carbon pesach, and then you purchased this guy who didn't have a milah. You do the milah, then now it's the nighttime. So it's a practical situation why he wouldn't have had the bris milah before that. This is hard to understand. If we're talking about a male that we say b'shas achilam, he has a bris, but not at the time of the shechita. Hechem shkachas. How do we find that situation? Lav, how is it not the yisyolud ben asil achila? Maybe it's because it's a baby that was born in between that time. So we see that the fact that this child was born after the shechita but before the achila, that is ma'akev, and therefore you wouldn't be able to smear oils on this child. So this is, again, a scenario of how it can be that you can have an issue of Mila Sacharov in the evening, B'shas Achila, but not in the afternoon, B'shas Asiyah. So Amar Rava B'tizbra Himo Lokal Zachar Merachmana V'oz Yaakov L'Asaiso. The pasuk says that you do the Mila on a boy, which means he's 8 days old, and then you can be makrav and he can eat the carbon. V'hai la bas me'ilahi. This pasuk is obviously talking about a situation where this child is already 8 days old, which is mashma. If he's less than 8 days old, it's not ma'akev, maybe fakert. We actually maybe see the difference, the opposite. Ella, how do we understand the situation that there's a difference, that there's something that happened in between? This child was sick and then only later on got better. So this is what it's referring to. So the child was sick and then got better. So then we say, okay, while he was sick, that was b'shas shchita, and therefore he could do a bris. But then afterwards he got healthy before the zman achila. So that's how it's possible that could have happened. So v'nesav le kol shiva. So the question is, nesav le kol shiva. Says Rashi, v'beni ispach. If let's say he got healthy in between the shchita and the achila, amay ma'akiv li ma'achila. Why is it ma'akim from the eating? His time hasn't come yet. The sanya will come on. Yom havrato ki yom havadato. The day of the healing is like the day of the birth. We don't just, he's healthy, okay, we immediately do the bris milah. No, we will wait, just like we wait from a child's birth until the 8th day, we'll also are going to wait that span of time. So the fact that he got healthy after shashchita, so what? He's not going to be able to eat. We're not going to have him eat. Well, the point is that we are not going to do the bris milah at that time. So he's not considered to be an oral, because he's not shaykh to do the bris milah. It's still shlo b'zmana. Right? So how do we understand this? More answers, dear Mashmuel, so they mean kol shiva. It means we actually gave him all 7 days, says Rashi. Shikvar nisrape zeh shmoinim yoim. He was already been healthy 8 days before. V'chol shmini shel yoser Pesach. And the 8th day, so he was healthy, maybe his baby's 30 days old. So he was sick. And then he got healthy a week before Pesach. And now the 8th day after him being healthy is Erev Pesach during this time. So why don't you just do the meal in the morning before the shashchita? So more answers, that's not possible. Be'inon, as we continue Ayin Alpha and Beis, me'es la'es. It's not just, okay, it's the morning. There has to be me'es la'es. And therefore, maybe he was sick and already in the middle of the afternoon 7-8 days ago, and now the time me'es la'es, now he's able to do the bris milah only after the shashchita, not before that. But Tani Huda, which is the name of a chacham, Yom havrato ki yom halvato. My love, my yom havrato will be in me'es la'es. When it comes to the day of a birth, you don't wait me'es la'es. So if a child is born at 4 in the afternoon, we don't say that on the 8th day you have to wait until 4 in the afternoon to do a bris milah. Av yom havrato will be in the me'es la'es, which is say the same thing. You shouldn't need me'es la'es when it comes to being healthy. Lo. Adif yom havrasom yom hilvadaso. Te'ilu yom hivaldai, the day is born, will be in me'es la'es. As we said, the 8th day you don't need to wait me'es la'es. Ve'ilu yom havrasai be in me'es la'es. In that situation, we do need me'es la'es, which makes sense because we're talking about health. A healthy baby, we just wait for 8 days. However, when it comes to someone who's sick, even though they're healthy, we don't want to do the bris milah right away. So we're going to be more strict, and therefore we're going to have to wait until then. Okay, so that's how it's shaykh to have this case of beni veni, not just pasha the child is born, because if the child's born, then at that moment, we don't say that there was any chiyuv of doing a bris milah and based on the words of the pasuk. It's only when you're shaykh to do the bris. But over here, we're talking about that the child was sick and got healthy. So that's one possibility. Now, Papa Omer could go into koiv le'ene, similar. However, his eyes were hurting, le'nuka. The ispach beni veni, he got healthy in between. So it's a similar type of answer. It says Rashi, ben asil echila. Between the shechita and the eating, the child's eyes got healthy. Ben noisten shiva yomim elami shechaltso chama. We only do this lengthy time as if it's like a fever. When it comes to like an eye issue, so we're going to wait until the eyes heal. However, at that moment, that happened in the afternoon between the shechita and the asiyah. The ispach beni veni. A different situation. His parents were in jail. So what does that mean? B'shas asiyah, at the time of the shechita, u'mitzvos milah mutelos aleihem. The parents are the ones that have to do the milah. V'lo al acher, not anyone else. V'heim inu yechoyin lasus pischan. They weren't able to bring the carbon pesach v'shachat shluchan aleihen. So who did the shechita? A shliach did it for them. They were going to get out of jail at 3 p.m, right before Pesach. Right? Another form of cherus. If they left b'shas achila, milas benom akavto, then the meal of their child will still be ma'akev. It has to be that the child had a meal at the time of the shechita, and if not. So he said, so when? Why? Again, because they weren't shach to do it. When they have a shliach to do the meal for. Okay. Rav Kahana b'reid Rav Nechemia Omer kagoin tumtum shenikra. So let's say you have a tumtum and his member tore v'nimsa zachar v'niveni, and it turned out that it was realized that he actually was taka zachar, and you had to do a bris meal on him. Rav Shravi Omer kagoin shaitzi rosh chutz leprazdor. We're talking leproizdor. We're talking about where the infant, this fetus, stuck his head outside of the birthing canal, and this was for 7 days. Says Rashi, Kvar Ovru Shiva Yomim, Mahi Shait at that time Havili Vlad. It's already considered to be a child. The Kaimalan Masechtas Nida, Yotza Rosho, once the baby's head comes out, Haryu Kiyod. It's considered like the child's born. Vahashta Beina Sil Achila, between the Shchita and the eating, Yotza Haguf, the Havili Zman Mila. So you could do the bris Mila. Why? Why could you do the bris Mila? Because the rest of the baby was still inside the mother. And it was still in the birthing canal. Only his head came out. So his head came out, so it counted as like 8 days. So he was not a shalom bismana, but it was impossible to do because she didn't actually give birth. The question is, Michai, how is it shaykh that you could have a baby's head outside of a mother and she still was in the middle of this very lengthy pregnancy and this child's going to live? Well, Sanya, we learned, and Rashi says over here, but Mapeles, when it comes to a child who is a stillborn, piv sosum v'taburo patuach, that the mouth is closed and the tabor is open. V'kivan shiatzel avir oilam. Once the child comes out, niftach then niftach hasosum piv v'nistam hapatuach taburo. So it's interesting. A child, while in utero, is surviving through the is not eating and is not really breathing. It's all of its life nutrients is coming through the mother, through the tabur, through the navel, and through the umbilical cord. So the question is like this: how is this child able to live? Right? The Rashi says, Mishum dula yonik, it wouldn't be able to nurse. So Hachmai could go in the Zante Ishta. His fever feeds him. His fever feeds him. What does that mean? Hachayli zon es achayla. So that's how he's able to survive somehow. Okay. So Ishta Daman. So whose fever? Ilema Ishta Didei, it's the child's fever. Ihachi kol shiva boy. So that means that would be for 7 days. El dezanse Ishta. It means the ime. It's the mother. It's the mother that continues to nurture this child. So the fact that this child is in this state, he's able to still survive because of his mother still providing nutrients for this child. It's only when the baby doesn't start screaming, then it actually could live. Says Rashi, Mishiyatza daha amran yoim havaraso ki yoim havdasai. No, I didn't do that. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yocham Rabbi Bana Arel Mekabel Hazah. So when it comes to someone who did not have bris milah, you can still sprinkle the mechatas on them. Why? Shekin mitzinu ba'avosenu. Shekibel hazak k'shena reilim. Shnemer ba'am, the pasuk says regarding when they entered into Eretz Canaan and they didn't have bris milah. Olu min hayarden, they ascended from the Yarden be'eser l'chodesh on the 10th of the month l'chodesh Rishon, the 10th day in the month of Nisan. Basara, which means on the 10th day, lo mihile, they didn't have a bris milah mishum chulsha d'urcha, because of, we're going to see this on the bottom of this Amud, because it was dangerous for them to have a bris milah. Hazah amos avid lahu. So the question is, when did they do the sprinkling of the mechat to become pure? Lav kashen arelim. L'chayr was while they're in oral. And therefore we see, Taka, that the din is that it still works. It says Rashi, Ukshiyomol in sarach lachser lahazois v'oicha b'kodshim. It says, let's look at this Rashi. On oral Yisrael shenitma b'meis mekabel hazol with taher b'tumasai. So he's allowed to become tamei. Ukshiyomol, and when he does bris milah afterwards, in sarach lachser lahazois. He doesn't have to sprinkle himself again, but oicha b'kodshim, to eat kodshim. We don't say that it's considered to be worthless. If we look at Rashi, it says in the pasuk Yeshua v'esbenehem hekim tachtam oisim moil Yeshua. So only later on in Perek Hey did Yeshua do a mass milah, but before that they were all arelim. Rashi says no, but dilma ovid pesach klal. Maybe it's not a raya that they were able to eat carbon pesach. Maybe they didn't bring carbon pesach then as well. We'll talk about that. It says that they did bring the carbon pesach. So how are they able to do so? It must be because you can't. How can you eat carbon pesach? Because you have to be tahar. That's why we read from Parshas Para, right before pesach. So too over here. So it must be that even if an oral you could still do. You can still be sprinkled upon. Maybe this is talking about the case of Pesach Babatuma. We know that if the majority of the people are Tameh, then we will still bring it. So Amalei Rabashi, Tanya Behedya Molu, it says Beferish that they did Mila, but Tavlu, and they immersed themselves. We also Pischayim, Pitahara, and they ate the Karban Pesach, Pitahara, impurity. It says Beferish, and therefore you can't come up with this answer. Again, so therefore it's a raya that even in oral you can do sprinkling of the mechatas. Amar Rab Amar Yitzchak Amar Rab lo nitna priyas milol Avinu. One element of the bris, in addition to the actual milah, you also have to do priyas milah. You have to pull back the membrane. Now, in the time of Avraham, that was not one of the requisites. Shnemar be'esahi Amar Hashem El Yoshua. At that moment, Asilocha Charvat Surim, that you should take a sharp knife, V'goimer. So it's telling us only at that time was it required. Mashma Priyas meal wasn't required before that. Maybe it's referring to these people because they didn't have a meal. Kimulim hayu kol hayotzim v'chol hayiludim. Imkein mashuv. Why does it say shuv? Says Rashi. Damash mizman achriti. It sounds like another time. Elav shmamina lapriya. It's coming to tell you that they still had to do priya. Elav lapriya. So my shenis. Why does it say shenis? Lakushe sov mila with chilos mila, to make a connection. Ma chilos mila, ma keves, just like the original one was makev, av sov mila ma'akven boy. So too the sov mila, which are the tzitzin, which are left over, these like strands of flesh, which were not cut by the bris. That's ma'akiv. Non ilhin sitzin ma'akven is a milah. Basa chayfes roiv hatara. If you have the majority of the flesh which is covering up the hatara, then oicha b'truma. Fine. Omar Ravina v'yitem Rabbi Yirmi barabo imarab basa chayfes roiv goyvishal hatara. Okay. So again, it's the raya that's telling you that when it came to that time, they did not have priya. But midbar, my time a little mohos. Question just stam, as we said before. Why didn't they do bris milah in the time when they're in the midbar? It could be because it was dangerous to. They were just walking around. It's very dangerous to have a bris milah. They're traveling. As we continue, I'm Beis Amud Aleph. There was this special wind, this northern wind that came. Says Rashi, Noichel loichama v'loi seinenes v'chama zarachas. So loi nashma hemrach safinis b'yoyim v'lozarcha chama leihem. So there was this special northern wind. Destanya kol oisam arboim shana, the 40 years. Shahayu Yisrael b'midbar lo nashma hemrach safinis. So it was a special wind that didn't happen. So my timer, why wasn't there this ruach svainus? Iboy sema mishum the nizuvim habi, because nizuvim hayu rebuked. Says Rashi, mamasa egel lo hayu ru'uyim or noiga. They weren't fit to be able to receive this light. Iboy sema deloy nibadur anani kavod, because they were not, so as not to blow away the anani hakavod. So these powerful ruach svainis, which has a way of healing, so that wasn't around, because if it was there, it would have blown away the anani hakavod. Amar Papa Hilkach Yomi de'eva. When it comes to a cloudy day, v'yomi de'shusa, or windy day, lo mahalinon. We don't want you to do a lo mahalinon bay. We don't want you to do a bris milah. Says Rashi, why Yoima Deshusa Sharuach Duroimis Minasheves Vihi Kosh Mikol Ruchos, because it could be a southern wind, not a northern wind. The southern winds are the worst. V'loi Misaychrinan Bay, and we're not going to let out blood during that time either. But in the Dashuba Rabim Shemer B'Sayim Hashem. However, nowadays, because we do it and people don't know any better, they don't even think about it. The truth is that there's a lot of things, Shemer B'Sayim Hashem, the foolish ones Hashem protects, and therefore we are lenient Bizman Hazeh. Okay, let's see a couple questions. Question 2. Tani Loida Yom Havraso Ki Yom Havdasai. Ma Kamashman Batana Lahavim in Maskana. What does it mean? The day of the birth is just like the day of this. So in the Havamina, we thought that meant that maybe it means you don't need me'es la'es when it comes to the healing, just like that. Your Maskana is, no, you actually have to wait ad yom shmini kamo miyom havdasa. It just means you have to wait 8 days. You have to wait for 8 days. Right? So the Havamin is do be'inan me'es la'es b'yom shehivriya, the day that you got healed. Just like then you don't have to heal. No. The Maskana is shesarcha hamtin ad yom shmini kamo miyom havdasa. You have to wait until the 8th day. TA 24. Mad Darsh Rabbi Kiva Matashim Sachal Yoichelbo. So what does Rabbi Kiva darshan from that? In Madu Rabbi Elazar Lo Darsh Lehachi, which is similar to question 1. This is TA 24, which basically says that if you have someone who is already born moil, or let's say you have a ger which has a meal without tefillah, so that is what is coming to that's the chiddush. Now Rabbi Elazar says a moil v'loy tavo is Israel noil and mohol ein sarach tiba hatafas dambris. Okay. TB 25. Tinik shahaya chayla v'hivri. Lagabi mamrin and yom havaraso ki yom haldasai. Lagabi mamrin and yom havaraso odiv miyom haldasai. Okay. So this we also had. So we do say that you actually have to wait. You have to wait until, again, after 8 days. However, when it comes to a bris milah, you do not require me'es l'es. However, when it comes, TB25, when it comes to health, then me'es l'es is necessary. Mamtinan miyom havara'aso shmoini yamin ki yom haldasai, they were born. Ve'adav miyom to be'inan me'es l'es, when it comes to being healthy. Ad kan.